Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off. Alright, and we're back. For real this time. Sorry about last time, guys. We were working on getting the episode recorded. Was even sitting down with someone, having somebody else join the conversation for a topic we were discussing. And unfortunately, Matthew's computer was having some difficulties that night. The first night we sat down, and then we sat down the next night to do it again, and his computer had crashed. And we just weren't able to get a solution that was workable in time to get last episode up. So we are both very sorry about that. But that's what last episode was about. Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say very sorry. We actually tried to record 2 different times. Both ended up failing. They were very different methods, and ultimately it required a replacement of the computer itself. And so now that I have it and everything's kind of going, we've tested things and we are ready, back in business. And let's start talking about the next episode. Joe, what do we got?
Well, today we're going to be talking about FPV and recording your flights. Real quick, I do want to say that within the next episode or two, there'll be some changes on our end to help ensure that what happened last time doesn't happen again. We'll have a fallback that maybe doesn't have the same quality that we're accustomed to and we desire, but ultimately we wouldn't have to skip an episode if all things fell through. We could still have audio to work with. So we're going to do what we can to not have that happen again. So thank you for everybody's patience on that. So we're going to talk about recording and FPV, specifically recording the flights. Matthew, you've done a lot of that. I just kind of started trying to record flights, and I know you do some FPV, so we're going to be talking about that later on. We're going to talk about our flight stories first, and before we even get into that, specifically because how I'm planning to segue from flight stories into the main topic, we're going to go ahead and bring up a listener comment now rather than after the stories, and then we'll get into it all. So, Matt, we had somebody write in, Neil from Ireland. He says, "Hey, Matt and Joe, loving the podcast. Well done, gents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very entertaining. I'm currently on episode 10 and catching up with a list of episodes." Well, you're almost here. Hang in there.
Hey, look, I'm impressed you made it past episode 5 and 6.
He says, "I started in the hobby back in 2019 thanks to a guy in our locality who happened to be flying his glider at our local sports field. He was very generous and let me have a go while he was up there. Thanks to that guy."
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Let's quick round of applause for that.
Yeah. I was hooked. I saved up and bought the trainer. He has in parentheses the Volantix Train Star. And gear required, all second hand.
I'll tell you what, Volantix just puts out pretty solid gear, as far as I can tell. Their packaging is maybe a little bit to be desired, but the planes themselves are pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I looked up the Volantix Train Star when he mentioned it, and it is a nice looking plane.
Yeah.
He says, "I managed to teach myself to fly using the model and a simulator.
Awesome.
I used to fly like Joe on the Microsoft Flight Simulator X software, so I knew how to fly and the aerodynamics involved. The following year, for my 50th, I got some money from the family and bought myself an EDF Vampire and a Walrus glider from Hobby King."
Oh, that Vampire is so pretty. That's been on my get it list for a while.
I'm going to have to look up what the Vampire looks like. I just know EDF and the difficulties we've had trying to get yours in the air.
I'm trying to, that's more because I still think the ESC is limiting the range of power on that EDF because I've had a lot of good success up until probably this last year, which is, of course, is pretty much our time together. So, since I was having some troubles, I focused on doing other things and I kind of put them down. But when an EDF is working, though, oh, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And the Vampire is just a sleek-looking plane.
I'll have to Google it once we're done here tonight.
Well, do you remember what the Vance Viking looks like?
No.
Okay. It's
Sorry.
the red plane. It was the red plane that I designed and built in like a week.
Okay.
At the beginning, I think February or March or something like that. All right.
Okay.
Well, if you don't have that if you have no reference for that, then don't worry.
Yeah. He goes on to say, my flying has gone from strength to strength, and I'm finding that I'm coming back from the field more often than not with a plane in one piece and looking like a plane. And that sometimes is the achievement.
It is, right. Yeah. Sometimes that's the best part.
He says, I've also started listening to the RC Plane Labs podcast also, so I'm looking forward to eventually getting into the building side of the hobby of RC planes rather than buying them, both foam and balsa. Building the planes has its own level of reward that goes with it. So definitely looking forward to being able to join in on that.
Good. Good. That's exciting to hear.
And then he goes on to mention, asking about the podcast Discord, so I was able to send him a link to that. And then he asked about the website, and I was able to send him a link to that as well. Best regards, Neil Ryans. From Limerick, Ireland.
All right.
So in regards to the Discord discussion, and unfortunately this is so far into the episodes, but Matthew and I discussed, and basically what had been happening is when we were going to have a build party, I would put a Discord link out there so people could join the channel. And after the build party was done, I would take that link down, just because I don't have a lot of experience moderating a Discord server and trying to keep just the random internet out of it. So
we want to keep
those.
Yeah, I think it's important to both of us that we keep that kind of environment, both with Discord and with if we were to ever do a forum or anything like that, to keep it to that positive, welcome aboard, we're all here to have a great time vibe. And it's tough to do when people are throwing, bots in there to just promote whatever nonsense that makes no sense to what we're doing, or is just bringing in a bunch of trolls. And
right.
I don't want to spend my time monitoring that, and I don't think you do either, Joe. So we're keeping it as kind of, I guess, limited access as possible, so that way that doesn't become our full-time job.
Right. And so we had been keeping it that way, and you and I kind of talked today, and I think what we're going to do because of this, like, if someone like Neil was hearing about the Discord, wanted to join in, and they're having to catch all the way up to catch the latest Discord invite link, because basically after each build party, I'd kill the link, and the link wouldn't go up until the next build party was being discussed. So I'm going to go and create an invite. It'll be in this episode's show notes, and I'm going to go through all the earlier episodes and put the Discord invites in there, so anybody else who's listening or in earlier episodes, will have access to that as well. But if anybody was listening through, was like, oh man, like, where's this Discord code? And you get here, that's why. And we'll see how that goes. If it becomes a problem, I may have to, I think there's one or two guys in our Discord who say that they've had decent experience moderating a Discord server, so I may have to tap them to kind of give some pointers on how to set things up so that we don't have just the internet flooding in. We've got people who actually want to be here as part of the community.
Because I want this to be a positive ad for you guys, for our listeners. And I mean, obviously we love it, but it's important that it be a good thing for everybody involved.
Yep. So yeah, I think that's that's everything before we wanted to get into the fly stories. I know, Matthew, you've got some FAA news updates we're going to talk
Yeah,
about
a little bit of that.
after everything else. So, Matt, kick us off. What you been flying?
Okay, good. I've been flying everything I can. No, I also want to say congratulations to Neil for like jumping in feet first and being smart about it. Obviously, picked up a trainer. He stuck with it, and I'm excited that he's jumping in this hobby with both feet. So, and that he's joined us as a listener, and so welcome aboard. And anybody else who's listening, who kind of just started, we're so happy you're here. So thank you. So I'm trying to think because it feels like it's been forever, and it kind of has. I guess it's been almost a whole month. And last we were talking, I was working on flying the Goblin that looks like a toucan Sam.
Right, because we had flight stories to us. What was 2 episodes ago? So anything we kind of discussed last time wasn't. So
Right.
Where did you leave off?
Boy, oh
last
boy.
time?
So right. So I think last time we were talking, like I'd built the FT Goblin and I made it because it was we'd had an episode released just after we got together and flew our little extravaganza fun, and I brought the Toucan Sam with me, and we were flying that on 3S and 4S, and so I continued to do that. And what I found, not only was it eye catching, so I flew it on like in front of people at the field that I fly at, and there wasn't a ton of people out there, but they're like, "Hey, look at that! That looks pretty cool." They enjoyed seeing Toucan Sam flying through the air, and they enjoyed. They're like, "That guy moves pretty fast. Like that's kicking." I'm sitting there like, I can't wait to see it on 6S. That's gonna be awesome.
Nuts.
Right. So I was sussing out just to make sure that the FPV was reliable. Right, that when I plugged it in, it was recording. There were no dropouts, that I could continue to do so, right? Because my ultimate goal with that is to get it as 6S and fly it from the first person view, like fly it from the nose of the cockpit there. And that's going to be stupid. I have yet to do it. But basically what I did, I made a number of recordings of the flight from the FPV. I flew it on 3S and I flew it on 4S, which was even cooler because it's even faster. Let's see. So I was doing some of that, and I had my girlfriend's father. He used to do this as control line and a little bit of the RC when he was younger. You know, kind of probably more like my age now, if not a little bit younger. And so he's been kind of coming out to the field every once in a while, and he's like, "Hey, let me know when you're coming. That way I don't feel like I'm just some guy, just some random spectator." I said, "Yeah." So he joined me out there the one time when I had my we talked about my go bag. In there are 2 goggles. I have the Sky Zone SO2V Plus is the goggle that's my primary goggle. That's the expensive one, and I have the Ishin VR-007. I'm getting into it only because we're going to talk about it a little bit later. But basically, one of them is the individual. Is basically like an eye goggle that you put on, like a ski goggle that you put on your head, and the other one is like a box goggle. So there's like a screen with a diopter that allows you to kind of focus, and it's like stuck on your face like a big box. Looks like literally like you're looking at a shoebox. Mm. And the shoebox is not as advanced. Like it does not. We'll get into it, but it doesn't produce the best signal because it only has one antenna to capture it. So if there's interference, it will not be switching to a different antenna that may have better signal, which is what the other goggles get to do. So I have a more solid signal from the other goggles. Anyway, so he joined me out in the field, and so he was watching. He was watching the plane go around. I said, "Would you like to be in the cockpit for a little bit?" And he said, "Well, sure." So I plugged in thinking. I'm not thinking, I might have this guy fall over and get sick or something if I do a bunch of barrel rolls and all that stuff. I'm just thinking he might have a lot of fun and just run around. So I threw in a 4S, and Set up the goggles. He put on the box goggles, or at least was just looking into it. And off I went. Had a good time. And he's like, "Oh, that was quite a bit." I said, "It got fuzzy a bunch, but it was neat. That was pretty cool." So that was a lot of fun. We had a really good day. The kids enjoyed. They were out there with me. They're doing their thing. They had another kid out there. One of the other fathers had their little guy with him, who ended up. I think when we were leaving, he was flying a Tundra or something, a bush plane. And then so my grandfather brought out his Banggood C-130, which Flight Test has released is like the FT Freighter or something. It's the same idea. I think theirs has a better range, I think is what they tweaked and made better, which is good. Anyway, so we just tested out a couple things, and I got it up in the air, and we flew it around a little bit, and he's like, "Oh, good, it works." Yeah, because he was worried. Last time it landed, it busted a motor off, and he glued it back on, but he wasn't really sure how to get it trimmed right so it flew well. Right. And it needed like a touch left or something like that. Okay. So we flew it around, and he's like, "Oh, good, this is great." So he did that, so it was a good day. When we went out that weekend, it was a good time. And then one of our listeners, the Hanger, was just kind of going, "Hey, I kind of thought about building something," and he started building an F7F Tiger Cat. Now, there's a guy on the FT forums called Damo RC. He builds very flat surfaced, like low poly looking planes, and they're awesome, right? And he's built an F7F Tiger Cat, very similar to what the Hanger put together. But when I saw the Hanger, I don't know, it just sort of struck me as this looks like a lot of fun. And it didn't help that he put together a video of him flying it. Now, this kid is incredibly talented if you've never seen him flying anything. Like, he can make pretty much anything look really good. But he took this plane, and he's like flying small circles around, with this plane. He's flying it around, think of it like a small, almost like a soccer goal. Like, that's about the distance he's kind of goofing around with it in. Low to the ground, maybe 10 feet in the air. He's just zipping it around in circles and doing a bunch of acrobatics and like just crazy maneuvers. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, this is ridiculous. So the F7F Tiger Cat is a twin engine plane that ended up after service in, I'm trying to remember which war. I think it was the Korean War. So I apologize to all listeners who were like, "It's not the Korean War," whatever. It was then put into service as a firefighting unit. So basically because it has such a heavy payload it can hold, the armaments on it, there's an absolute monster amount of payload it can hold. And the wingtips fold in so it can land on an aircraft carrier, so it can slow down significantly. And then they have this pod that they kind of, like this belly, almost like a C-130 belly, that they kind of put on the bottom of this thing. And they use that to basically, I guess it lands on the water, it sucks up a bunch, and then they take off, or they fill it up with the firefighting
That's a
chemicals.
Lot of lifting power.
Dude, it's crazy. Yeah, it's and it does, like, what he built. So what I love about what he put together was it was very reminiscent of the old school, the old school FT style build, where the nacelles or the power pods are literally just three-sided, a top, two sides, a general shape. I think it tapered in the back, so it fit really well with the profile. The main fuse is just a big, long, tall box, because the F7F Tiger Cat is a very thin but very tall profile. And it kind of comes down to a point, which he did really well. He took the nose, he made it replaceable. So when you nose it in, because it's possible.
Inevitably.
Which he ended up actually doing that. And he's like, "Oh, I busted the whole thing." Oh, well, really just the nose. I'll build a new one. And he built a new nose. He puts it on, and away he goes. The motors are still intact. The wings are still intact. Most of the fuse and the tail sections are all good. So all he had to do is replace that. Matter of fact, he says, honestly, it flies really well without the nose. So, I mean, I don't need it, but it's okay. And I put my batteries I didn't put in a wire harness for the battery. So I have 2 batteries in each nacelle. So honestly, there's other than the receiver, there's almost nothing in the fuselage. So mine, it's completely hollow, which is perfect for like parachute guide drops, bomb drops, water balloon drops, or something. You know what I mean? Like I
Mm-hmm.
just name an idea, and it's got a big open thing that I could use to do dumb stuff with. So I definitely have. So I built it, and I built it really quick. I happen to be just, I don't know. I was looking to build something because it felt like it'd been forever since I built something. So I took out my projector and I projected onto the wall, and I traced out the pattern, which took very little time. I think it ends up taking 5 sheets, but again, real simple build. Within a couple hours, I had the thing. The next day, I had the thing ready to go. I had just received. I think that was partly what pushed it. Was I received the 4-pack of the 2212 1400 kV. Was it 13 turn motors?
Is that
Was it 10
the
turn?
same motor you ended up sending me?
Yes. Yeah, it's the one
Okay.
that's supposed to go on the 7. And I bought 4 of them because I wanted to have 2 that went on my old plane. That's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, is remarkably like the F7F Tiger Cat, just their pusher configuration. I wanted 1 for the 7 and then 1 for the Texan. When I get the skins in, I'm going to make the Texan, and I wanted a motor to put directly on that. So anyway, so those motors are pretty hefty. Like they do a great job of. There's a lot of pull,
Right.
like a lot. So I was pretty impressed with that. I'm sure if I put a more aggressive prop on there, I can definitely. Right now, I had it going with slow fly 10-inch props, so 10x47 props. And the power system was the 2200 3-cells. Nothing fancy. The limiting agent with those motors is that they can only go up to a 3-cell. So you can't like throw a stupid cell battery and get something going on.
Right.
Anyway, so I maidened that. And, the first, I put landing gear on it because there's something that said you don't want to toss this in the air. Like, just let it come off the ground. So I built landing gear. I put it together. And I sent it. It looks like a stork. It's very, very tall. Mainly because I wanted there to be enough clearance that while I was rolling through the relatively tall grass in my field, that I wouldn't have a bunch of prop strikes while I was doing that. Anyway, so I got that up in the air and I flew it around. I flew a whole battery, and it had a couple weird tendencies, some of which I think were from me trying to figure out how the differential throttle was going, and just trimming it out and things like that, some basic stuff. But for the most part, it flew really, really well. I did a couple modifications so that I could take the wing off, because the way the original plans are is you feed the wing through and you glue it in, which is a very sound method, except my car I can't accept that size plane with a wing in it. So,
Yeah.
and it was ultimately the method that I chose. It was almost like a double folded door, like where one folds in and then the other one folds directly on top, and then they clasp together, and that's what holds the wing down. And I don't know. It's first time trying it, and I didn't do a good enough job with it. And so the second flight, the wing loosed. So it basically lifted up,
Uh-oh.
changed the angle of attack, and it got really, really, really squirrely. I think because of that, then all of a sudden the CG shifted around, and ultimately within about 20 seconds of getting in the air, it started swirling around, and I brought it, nose down into the ground. So my nose got busted as well, which I
Good thing you
just
can fly
finished.
without it.
Right? You can fly without it. But at that point, I think I'd broken a prop, and I was kind of like, all right, we're done for the day. I ended up pulling out the Spitfire, and then we spent the rest of that day buddy boxing with my kids, flying Spitfires and stuff like that. So I think we pulled out one battery, we just flew Spitfire, and then later in that week, we buddy boxed. That was a good time. Oh, The other thing, while I was doing all that stuff, I was also setting up the Toucan for a 6S flight, which I had talked about. And I finally got the harness built to basically pair two 3-cell batteries, two identical 3-cell batteries to make it a 6-cell. So it's a 6-cell
Okay.
1300, 1300 milliamp battery, effectively, which turns out weighs almost the same as a 2200 3-cell or a 1500 4-cell, which is what I was kind of doing. It's like the more cells I put in, the fewer milliamp hours. So, and the 2200 I kind of pushed all the way to the wing, and then the 1300 I pushed all the way to the front wall. So I ended up balancing it out. I was like, this is going to be awesome. So and this is part of why we're talking about it. I think I had a tripod because my kids, they didn't feel like filming that day. And my head cam stopped working within about 4 minutes of turning it on. I think the batteries died, or God knows. I really don't know what
That
the heck's
head
wrong with
cam
that
gives you
thing.
more trouble.
Yeah, that thing has been giving me. Like when it works, it's amazing. Like it works great,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't work often. So I don't know. It was a $20 purchase. It's like a Polaroid cube or something like that. And again, it was 20. I'm like, if it's $20 and it shoots 1080p, I can throw it on a hat and we'll see what happens, right?
Right.
I wasn't gonna cry too hard about it. It's just more annoying than anything. So I got that, and then I have the FPV footage. So I said, all right, let's do this. No, I think Quinn was able to. He filmed that one because I'm like, it's a 6S. Like this is the first and maybe the only time this flies is a 6S. Could you please? Because I said if this hat cam isn't working, I'm getting nothing. And I said I'd really like to get this. And he said, okay, yeah, fine. I said this is gonna go really fast, so get ready. And so sure as not, I put it up to must have been a third throttle, and that thing was already taken off, like it was ready to go. And it zoomed out of my hand. I was like, cool. So I kicked it up to full throttle just to see what it did, and and then off it went. It was going fast, and it was flying really well too. I think I did a little bit of trimming because, as you know, the faster you go, the more the the plane acts a little differently. It's getting a little bit extra lift, and so you kind of want to trim out your reflex to kind of match what's going on to balance it out. Anyway, so I'm running around with this thing for, man, I think it was a good solid minute. And I'm running between like 50% throttle, which is acting like a 4-cell. And then I kicked it up to 6-cell. And I'm zooming from the field to the road and back again, like so fast. It was so good. And then I'm going, and all of a sudden I hear whoosh, and then I see like this small line of smoke, probably about, I guess about 50 feet. So, I mean, it was going for a split second. And then I lose all power. The motor must have ceased up. But the way I've got it set up is the batteries feed through BEC, which powers the receiver, and then that powers into the motor system, into the ESC and the motor. And so I'm like, uh-oh. So I pull it up and I glide it down to the ground as best I can. It comes down a little hard, but generally speaking, it came down with no ill effects. Nothing was cracked. Ultimately, all I got to do is put a motor on it again, and it's ready to fly again. So when I picked it up, the motor was cooked. I mean, it looked like the plastic that was I have the fiber reinforced plastic tape that was over top of the firewall that's been glued onto the back. So the plane tapers to it's like a big football. It tapers to basically the size of a FT firewall, which is like 2 inch by I think 1.2 inches or 1.5 inches. And then so I taped over that to make sure it wouldn't go anywhere after it was glued on. And then it's been, and then the motor isn't screwed onto the firewall. Well, I think the plastic, because all that was left was the fiber crossing over the back. The whole back of it melted and I think went into the motor itself and completely burnt up.
So what burned first? Because I didn't remember you saying anything about the tape having melted up.
Look, well, because I had I had to bring it home and look. I started like disassembling what's going on. Like the motor hadn't completely seized, but it was very gummy. Like where I'm
Right.
rotating it, and it's like this isn't working well. Um, so, and then I realized that's where I realized I'm like, there's no plastic left in the tape. Like the fiber is still there holding it together, but there's
Mm-hmm.
no plastic. And there's big black globs on the bottom of the motor, which is the back of the motor, or I guess the front of the motor, right?
Right.
Because it's a pusher. So it's basically globbed onto the bottom. The whole insides were black, like all the windings were black, top and bottom. Like when you're looking at it's an Eco, Emax Eco 1700 kV up to 6L, right? 2307 or something, a 2208 or something along those lines.
Okay. I didn't
2307.
realize that this was a pusher design. Or
Yeah.
are you thinking maybe the motor overheated because it was in a pusher orientation? It wasn't getting any kind of air inside the can to cool the motor.
I think the motor itself got super hot, which honestly, I don't know if it damaged the windings, if it damaged the magnets themselves, because we talked about that at a certain temperature, the magnets start demagnetizing. And usually,
Right.
so that happens before the wires burn up. So usually, if you have a winding go, you've probably destroyed the magnets too. Um, yeah, I mean, other than disassembling the entire thing, which I didn't disassemble the motor, I was thinking about calling up Emax and just saying, hey, look, I have a motor. I'd love, like, it was running at 6S. I was going to full tilt on a pusher. Like, it stopped about a minute in. What, like, can you look at this and tell me what happened? I mean, I'd love a replacement, but more importantly, I'd love to know, am I safe? Like, what do I need to do to put another one of these on this and run it at 6S? Because that's what I'd like to do.
Right. Was this did I run it too hard?
Right. And so the thing is the ESC was in perfect condition, and that was like partially enclosed in the plane. Like, I mean, it was in there. It's not like it was sitting on the surface or it gets super cooled or anything. The ESC was in great condition. So it was all motor. Absolutely all motor that failed. And again, I don't know if it's because the plastic melted, dripped on the motor didn't get any more air, and it cascaded from there. I mean,
Yeah, well, I don't know, because like we do have the plastic running behind the motor. Like, of course, it covers the firewall. So if that
right.
plastic decided to melt, I suppose it's possible it got up inside the can. At which point,
Right.
you've got
It
plastic
would've dripped
strings
off
slinging
into it.
everywhere and just steady staying melted. So
Yeah.
that I would almost say, like, don't worry about trying to send it back. Like, pop the top off that can, have a look inside, and see if you find plastic. Because
Yeah.
I'd almost say you probably got plastic from the tape in there if it got that hot. But
It did.
I don't know.
I'm pretty certain. So okay, so then fast forward about a week, or actually more like a day or two, and I'm talking with some of the guys on Discord. I have my favorites that I kibitz about with different ideas and different projects, and one of them loves to go and look up, like, okay, let me do the ER calc, which is basically they do the motor calc stuff, where you say, hey, if I'm running this and I got this and I'm going this fast and I'm pumping this 6L through, how hot should the motor get, right?
Right.
And he's like, okay, well, how much air do you think it gets? I'm like, I don't know, it's a pusher, so like whatever comes off the back of this thing. I said, so it should be plenty, like it's pretty streamlined. It should be fine. And one of them, I was talking to our buddy that we're going to have on the show last week, and he's built one of these. And he's like, yeah, maybe, it's not getting as much air because it's being a pusher. So the fuse is sort of in the way. So it's maybe building scoops on the side might be helpful. And I was thinking about it like that. That might be something worth trying, even if it's just to cool off the plastic, so it doesn't melt into the motor. Anyways, he was saying, he goes, with poor, so with poor ventilation, that motor will get up to like 600 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And he's saying that's pretty much...
You absolutely melted that tape.
Yeah, right. He goes, even with like mediocre ventilation, which is probably more like where I've got it, he goes, it was still running like 350 degrees, which is definitely enough to melt that plastic, which would be enough to basically mess everything else up too.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, shoot. And he said, what you need is to have like scoops, because the scoops will redirect the air, cool everything off, and it should be running around 150 to 170 degrees. You know, that's where it should be running. And he goes, you're going to have to probably build scoops on this if you want to run it on 6S. I said, okay. That won't be hard to do, but I'm not prepared to do it yet. And I'm not willing to sacrifice another motor yet.
Right.
You know, so that project has been put aside. But I'll tell you what, that was a 1 minute of it. It must have been going between 80 to 100 miles an hour. That thing was cooking. It was so awesome. Oh man,
dude, I wouldn't even be mad about that motor burning up. Just take it as a learning lesson.
No, man, I'm not mad at all. Like I'm miffed. Like it sucks because they're good motors. I've really enjoyed the motor. It's a 1700 kV, so it's designed for a higher voltage. So it's designed to have more cells running through it. And it shows because, you know, again, I was running 4-cell and it was behaving like most planes do on a 3-cell, more or less. So when you kicked it up to 6S, though, oh man, so much fun. All right, so that aside, I also let's see, I programmed the T16 for differential throttle on my T37. The T37 is that little papercraft plane that I've been talking about.
Okay.
And I took it out and I brought it out to my driveway and I flew it in the cul-de-sac, which I should never do. But I did.
And yet you continue to do.
Well, because, you know, it's like right there. And these planes are little. They're itty bitty. Mm-hmm. It's like the size of a laptop. It's adorable.
That's still a hunk of thing flying through the air.
Yeah, it's also got 1106 Gremlin motors, and that baby cooks. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, especially with the differential throttle. Remember that first time... yeah, if you remember the one motor came off and the other one was detaching the paper. Yeah, it was, anyway. Or maybe, I'm trying to think, did we talk about that? So after I flew it a couple times in the cul-de-sac, I decided it's time to finish it up and officially get it going. So I brought it out to the field, I cooked it up, and I threw it, and it flew. It flew actually pretty well. I brought it out, I turned it around, and about halfway down the field, one of the nacelles, so one of the 3D printed mounts literally came off the plane completely, which needs to say starts making the plane do some really weird stuff. I'm like, oh, that's not normal. Uh-oh.
Yeah, because your thrust angles are all thrown off.
Yeah, and all my thrust. And then the other motor, the paper was peeling away that the motor was mounted to. So the 3D printed mount was glued to paper, which was coming off of the foam. so one side it came. It was bad. Well, it was too much throttle. Like it was too much thrust for that plane to sustain. I guess I just hadn't really shored up the mounting system as well as I realized I didn't realize I needed to. So anyway, but it was flying pretty well. There are some weird tendencies. I was trying to figure out like how to work out the differential thrust and how much effect that actually had, and was it doing like if I'm doing differential thrust, it's yawing to the left or to the right, and the goal is by having pusher motors, the differential speeds on the motor should also provide a positive rolling action with it. So it should be a coordinated turn, and that's what I was ultimately trying to get to, is to see if I could see if that was happening, which is what I wanted, because then that would make it a pretty relaxing, fun flight. The aileron surface came off along with those motors. Like, I think that was in the crash, but all in all, considering what it's been through, it flew in the cul-de-sac, it smacked onto the ground, bounced off, and then cartwheeled into a neighbor's yard. That's how it started. It also did another thing where it landed really hard onto the pavement. That was like how it started. Then I've flown it and I've crashed it like pretty bad because that crash was not kind. After the motors came off, and that absolutely
No.
like I had no control. It was a mess. Um, but it's still all in all, it's in good shape. Like the general plane is intact, and I've got to glue the control surface back on and mount the motors up, and I'm probably ready to take it on another try. I think this time I'll go at the high school, and I'll try to run it off of the pavement there or the sidewalk, so I can actually get it off the ground from the pavement.
Right.
But it's kind of lower priority right now. There's a couple old projects I want to finish. A bunch of those that are like right at the edge of being done. So that kind of brings with the Tiger Cat Maiden, and then the next time I went to fly it, and of course this is the time I'm going to show everybody this plane. It's going to be awesome. I'm out on Sunday. I've got a bunch of people there. I've finished, and of course I finished up all the livery. So I made all the letters. I made the end number. I have my logo on the side. I even put like a little nickname on the front of the thing. Susie Q, I think, was what I put on there. And I'm like, this is going to be awesome. Everybody's going to think this is the best. And people were coming around like, oh, it looks pretty good. What is that? You know? And I told them and all that stuff. And that's where I took it off the ground. And within about 15 seconds, it was all done. So needless to say, the rest of that week, I repaired the nose was easy to repair. I could have pulled it off, but I decided to stick with it and just see how it repaired, and it did pretty well. You can see the creases, but for the most part, it doesn't affect any of the flying. I repaired the hatch. I kind of redid some of my idea, and more or less did what I did with the Spruce Gosling, which is basically have the wing mounted where it there's like popsicle sticks or sticks that groove into the front, and then the back of the wing sits down, and then you rubber band that down.
Okay.
And so basically kind of I could either do a screw that like bolts the wing down or the rubber bands to keep it on. So I got out to the field ready to go, except I forgot my rubber bands. Apparently they were in a bag on the table. So I started searching my car. Fortunately, I have 2 rubber bands that I found that were in good condition. So I was like, yes. So I, X-braced the wings on, and I gave it another flight. And it was windy, and it was cold. And I could tell. So the interesting thing about the Tiger Cat is it has a very tall fuselage. And so it basically creates a very wide, ruddery surface for the plane to get pushed around when it's windy. So I flew it around and had a good old time, and I kind of I figured out all the tendencies and differential throttle. Just worked with that and had a good time, and I just flew it around, and it's really agile. And I tried the different rates, like low rates versus high rates, and all that kind of stuff. And she's an acrobatic bird if you want her to be. You bust up the throws, and you'll be flying her like the Hanger does in his video. Or you could bring down the throws a little bit, decrease the differential throttle, and just have an easy, relaxing flight. And to me, it's a really good platform. I had a camera right on the nose. It's a big, wide platform. There's a cockpit, which I've printed out a pilot that's perfect size for that. So I'm probably going to do up a cockpit. Honestly, that Papercraft T-37 has got me excited about the idea of modeling up like cockpits and things like that as part of your model. And if you can put like an FPV camera back there, which the one I have is an all-in-one little square thing. I think it's like 1.5 centimeters by 1.5 centimeters is the size. So it's really tiny. So if you put that in a cockpit and you do up a cockpit to look pretty good, like you could have a real fun time flying as if you're in your plane, Okay. So I flew that, and in this last week, I've pulled out the Viking with intents of making headway on that and finishing that up. I'm putting together the firewalls for the the Heaven Spade carrier, so I can get motors on that. And the ERC time saver, I have printed out all the parts, and I've begun constructing it. I have the X and the Y axis built, and I am probably a stone's throw away, because I'm debating whether or not I'm going to make it bigger so it can accommodate monster foam, which is like a double sheet,
Right.
which actually would make it print, well, not twice as fast, but it would make it print twice the sheets at once, so less effort, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting that together, and I'm about to put the electronics in it. Is probably what I'm going to do at some point tomorrow.
That's what I'm excited to see as a project come together, is the potential that has.
Yeah, the ERC time saver. It's Edwards RC is the guy, and he created this thing called the time saver. It's basically just a needle cutter. So think of it like a sewing machine and a CNC machine mushed together, right? So it's got a motor with a needle that does like a sewing machine, just pokes, and then it's a CNC XY cutter, and then there's a servo that kind of raises it up and down, just enough to like stop the cutting from hitting the foam. And so literally, so it's designed. He designed that because he's like, oh, I'm so tired of cutting these things out. I want something to be able to do this for me. That would be amazing. And obviously, I think he didn't have enough money for a laser cutter, or he wasn't looking to invest thousands of dollars in that. So he's like, but for like $100, maybe $150, I can build like the very low end 2D CNC machine, and instead of putting a cutter head on it, let's put basically, it's honestly, was a 2212 1000 kV 13 turn motor. It's basically the same orange bottom generic motor with a 12 amp ESC, and then he's basically just has like one of those little throttle toggles that just changes the speed of that, and all it does is it runs up, and the needle goes in and out and just runs along the foam.
I'm curious to see how clean those edges are.
They look well. His look really clean.
Mm.
And a lot of people have said like, oh yeah, when you get it done and dialed in, like it's as good as if you had cut it with like it's a little bit. You could tell that it's not like razor cut, but it's pretty darn close. So I'm with you. I'm curious to see how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, I know you've got a small list of orders that you're kind of building up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were talking about it before this call. Yeah, so how about I get a couple Spitfires out of that, and this and that.
Well, you know that's one of those planes that it's probably the first one I'm going to get a G code for, if I can't find somebody who's already got it, because it's just such a good plane, and we keep flying it, and I'm looking forward to being able to give the controls to my son, and not being on a buddy box. And if I had the foam cutter to be able to cut out a new one, I know I'll be a lot less concerned about if he tanks it into the ground. Like, that's all right. We'll just cut a new one, and then
you've proven resourceful in repairing them so far.
Yeah, I have. I feel like when it gets all busted up like that, when we repair it, it feels like it's been through battle at that point.
Oh yeah, mine definitely looked like it had.
That's awesome. So I guess that brings us to you, right? And your Spitfire.
So speaking of repairing Spitfires, I'm trying to remember where we had left off last time. I believe the last time we left off,
you crashed it into
the oak tree. Yeah,
yeah, you did.
It tore the wing clean off. And
there ain't no way.
I'm trying to remember what you and I have talked about, and what's been on air, but basically it. So
well, you described the damage. You basically described that you hit the tree, and I think you described the damage, and you were debating whether or not you were going to fix it, or if you're going to just decide to rebuild.
the Spitfire, the FT Spitfire, the way that it's put together, or the way that you've kind of got two options when it comes to building it and mounting the wing, which are and cut two holes in the fuselage, one on either side, that are the shape of the wing, and you build the wing. It's got a bit of dihedral to it, which kind of makes fitting it in there a little weird. But you can shove the wing through the side of the fuselage, out the other side, get it centered up, and then glue it all the way around. And that is the wing locked in. And then there's also another method if you want to do a removable wing style, that you turn the underside of the fuselage into a flap for holding the wing, and you're rubber banding that shut so that you can take the rubber bands off, open the bottom of the fuse, and pull your wing off or breaking it down and going.
Right. That's almost the inverse of what I did with the F7F Tiger Cat.
Right, because you had done it, like, up top, I think.
Yeah, because it's nearly a top mount. But he designed it to slide through the fuse, but the same idea. It's that close to one of the edges.
So I ended up doing the, slide the wing through the side of the fuselage and glue it all the way around, which resulted in a very sturdy plane, and you had done yours the same way. The wings were real strong. That Spitfire has barrel rolled on a landing. It has been broken in half. The previous crash crashed into somebody's wooden fence, so it snapped in half. The back end swung around to the front. So I can't say, I can't sing the praises enough for actually just gluing that wing in as opposed to doing the flap. I'm sure, there's need for that design, but I've got enough room to carry it and not have to take the wing off. So I'd flown it into the oak tree, ripped the wing clean off, which also meant that all the aileron wires came loose. The aileron servo wires, like the extensions came off. The little servo clips that you gave me, or the servo wire junction, where it.
They're
so
servo
you had
keepers.
3D. Huh?
They're servo keep. They're retention clips, basically.
Yeah, you had given me some clips that you 3D printed, which are basically just a flat slit of plastic with two slots on the ends. That the flat part went up against the joining of the servo extender to the servo wire, and then the wires went through the slits, and that was what to help protect those against like yanking and such.
Yeah, it's easy when you're kind of like messing around with the receiver and you're tugging on this wire or that. The worst, and this is from experience, the worst thing is while you're trying to like figure stuff out, and let's say your wing slips off the table or something, you try to catch it, you're holding the receiver, you're not trying to yoink the thing out. But if those two receivers, like if that wire pulls apart from the receiver, like now you have to either somehow fish it out, or you got to cut a patch or something in the wing. And like, so those little keepers stop that kind of stuff from happening. That while you're putting it together, like you can rest assured that your extension wires are going to keep attached to the receivers, but they are not designed to hold fast this joint in the event of a crash, right? Like they are designed to come apart after that. Like if it's that bad, like no, really, give up the ghost.
No, it was that bad.
It was that
bad. So, I grabbed it. I brought it home. I was fairly certain the Spitfire was done. I told you as much.
I think it was just after I crashed the Tiger Cat. I'm looking at the Tiger Cat going like, oh, that's a rough repair. And then you're showing me your Spitfire going, that's a rough repair. And I'm like, dude, we can do it. We can do it.
Yeah, because I also posted in the Discord, I was like, rip Spitfire. I was like, nah, it's, I guess there's a number of people rooting for the Spitfire at this point. Because it's been through the blender. anyway, so I ultimately
Nice.
did glue it back together.
Good.
I opted to get off my high horse of having pristine planes every time they crash, and
I think
attempt. Go ahead.
no. I was gonna say, I do. Have we broken you of that idea yet, or is it
I
more
don't
like,
know.
I'm okay. You should be okay. Be okay with Hanger Queens. They have a place.
It's I I just I'm enjoying the Spitfire. I know that one takes a considerable considerably more time to get put together and like ready to fly than say the Fogey. So I was like,
Yeah.
because I think I've got like 20 hours in that one between cutting and building and the time spent at your place and then the painting, which a lot of that time was spent watching Star Trek DS9 and Star Trek Enterprise while I was cutting the parts out. So,
Yeah.
that time's a bit bloated. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I do when I build is I'll have
Yeah.
something playing and I'll kind of build and do a lot of watching. Um, but I got the wing glued back on, and that took a little doing because there was nothing there to hold the wing in place except my hands. So I had to kind of glue section by section the top of this wing or the top back part of one side of the wing while then really pumping it to it. I could see the edge of the line where it was, where the fuselage was sitting because there was no paint there. So I really laid the glue to it, put the fuselage on, tried to keep it as straight as I could, and had to hold it there for a while so the glue had time to cool,
Yeah. That's the hardest
sufficiently.
part.
Mm-hmm. And then time spent, got the wing glued back on, checked it, fairly solid. I'll see if I can get a picture that I had taken and sent to you where there's a chunk missing out of the side of the fuselage because when the wing ripped off, it also took a piece of the fuselage with it.
Yeah.
And I opted to not try to put that back on because there was no real structural strength coming from it. It was
Right.
just a piece of the wing that wasn't quite glued in, and I had enough glue elsewhere. But long story, I got it glued back in.
And 50
I
grams
did,
of glue later.
yeah, just so much glue. And I did have to, uh, fish for those servo wires like we talked about, and I've got the cardstock paper serving as the canopy and whatever else. So I just ended up cutting 2 holes in the top of that so I get my fingers down in there and a pair of needle nose and fish them forward.
Okay.
And then had to figure out how to, how I had the channels laid out again.
Wait, is
Because
it
kind of
T?
once I get them set up, the only thing that I try to only plug in and unplug the throttle channel. I don't try to
Right.
do a bunch of unplugging on the other ones. But so I got it rebuilt, and I was hoping to fly it that Saturday, which a couple weeks ago. But I was heading out to where I'm involved with student ministries with the church, and they were having a outdoor gathering and fun time for the kids, and so I was helping out with one of the stations out there. And I thought, okay, the kids will play for a little bit. The station will be done. Surely they're not going to want to be doing what I'm doing the whole time. And then once they're done, I'll be able to pull the Spitfire out and fly it and show the kids, and they'll have a good time. And maybe after I fly the Spitfire a little bit, because I had Spitfire in the Fogey. As once I fly the Spitfire a little bit, maybe if one of them want to try it out, I'll get the Fogey out and kind of let them try it out and expose them to the hobby. But it ended up that my station was being used the whole time, so I never got the break until right as they were loading up to
Right.
everybody get back in the bus and go back to the church to be picked up, and the sun was already setting. And I said, you know what,
Yeah.
I'll get some flight time anyway. So a little bit of profile flying or silhouette flying as
Oh,
the sun was dipping, but it flew well. And that was the
Good.
first flight after I glued the wing back on. Like it flew well. I was flying over a cornfield. I kind of had I had things behind me, so I was trying to keep it out there.
Nothing
So
says an honest test Like, let's do it when it's really hard to see how the plane's flying.
I
I'm just
swear we
kidding.
have a problem, Matthew.
We do. That's always seems to be when we get out there.
Um,
But that's good though. I mean, what you want to see is like, is it now all of a sudden have weird tendencies, or does it fly like it always does, and the repairs were a success? So what was the verdict?
it flies. It flew. Correction.
Well, did it fly? Did it have a bunch of? Did it start like always turn to the left, or was? I mean, did you have to make some corrections,
Well,
but it seemed to fly
so
okay, or did it all of a sudden start getting the, hey, when your throttle is lower than this, it starts doing weird stuff that it normally didn't do?
it's hard to say because one, it's been a few weeks, but two, like, yes, I was flying in a cornfield, but the section of the cornfield I was flying in was a smaller section. So, in as much as I had plenty of room to fly, I didn't really have enough room to
Open her up.
really like let her go straight for a long time to see what she was doing. Like,
Yeah.
I was constantly turning and pulling and like keeping her and in as much as I've had several flights with the Spitfire, I'm still getting used to 4-channel control from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But ran the battery out on that flight, and that was probably only like 8 or 9 minutes of fly time max. But I got 2 flights. I'd flown her, landed her, flew her again, and then landed her again, and then I put her in the back of the car and had to go home.
Nice.
And then, then we were going to have that recording for what would have been last episode. But this past weekend, I went out. I said, you know what? I need to fly again because I've only got the one flight story. So I went out this past weekend. I took the Spitfire and the Fogey, but I didn't get out early enough to have a ton of time. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to fly the Spitfire. And so I put the 4-cell in it and got it balanced out, CG where it needed to be. Hand launched it. Awesome. And we'll talk about recording again in a little bit, but this is my first attempt to actually record my flights. And I had rubber banded my cell phone to my forehead trying to capture this. And so I really wish that had worked out better than it did because of the flying that I was doing this time.
Yeah, yeah.
And it, I got her up, I got her flying around, got her trimmed out, feeling right. And even in my recording, I'll say, I'm just going to fly her gentle. I'm just going to have a good time with it, not do anything crazy. And then,
then you realized, no, you brought her out, you trimmed her out a little bit because I think it needed a beep or two trim. And you're like, okay, she's flying okay. And you did a little like gentle loop, and then like not loop, like as a circuit. You kind of went out and back.
There's a couple circuit loops.
Okay, did good. Okay, do a quick turn. Okay, that's behaving okay. Looks like she's okay. All right, let's have some fun.
Now we're going to have some fun. and so
I'll be gentle, I promise.
I decided to do some low flying. And by low flying...
Oh, my God. Okay, most people, especially when they're new, low flying is like I'm at the tops of a building or like midway down trees. Like I'm about, 20 feet up. Right. That's low flying because, if you dumb thumb something, there's no recovery. There's no recovery when you're that low. And when you're new, like when you're a little bit more experienced, you can probably recover sort of from that. It's a mess, but you might not crash it into the ground. You might be able to recover. But you talk about low flying. Let's talk about what Joe means by low flying. Let's hear it. What is your definition of low flying, Joe?
Joe decided that the front lawn of my old high school needed this grass cut. The grass was too tall.
But did it? No, it was already trimmed.
No, not really. So I was flying it purposefully because I wanted to do like really low flight. Like I wanted to not just be, because I've kind of been shoulder height before. Not necessarily always on purpose. That's just kind of the altitude I was flying at, and I was getting up from there.
Yeah.
But I wanted to like really push the flight deck, and so like I had her 1.5 foot, 1 foot, 2 foot, kind of in that range off the ground, flying at about 40% throttle, which isn't cooking for the Spitfire, but it's moving pretty good. She's solidly in the air. She's flying.
Yeah.
And the only thing was I didn't have her trimmed out perfectly. So she still had a bit of nose down, like where she was still wanting to descend at that throttle speed. So I brought her in for low flying and then realized she was dipping, so gave her a bit of elevator up because if the video had caught it, but there was aimed too high because your forehead has a tilt to it. But I was jerking her up so she'd bounce up from like the prop almost cutting the grass to the plane being 2 foot off the ground, and it kind of descend again until I'd jerk her back up. But so she was kind of lightly bunny hopping along on the first pass, and then I kind of got the feel for that. And I did a couple more low passes, and now you were able to see, and I did Google it to make sure I had the right name. It is the Immelman that you were talking about.
Yep.
Where when I would finish my low pass run, I would pull her up, let her climb straight up, and then pull back again to get her inverted, flying the other way, and then I'd aileron roll over to go out and get away from me.
Yep.
And
half a loop into a barrel roll.
Yeah. I'd done 2 or 3 low flight passes at this point and was setting up for another one or something, and she just stalled out. I'm still not sure what happened.
Yeah.
It just she was good, and then she wasn't, and she just fell out of the air.
Yeah, that's what it looked like too. That was the weirdest thing. Because did you feel the throttle give out or something?
Mm-mm.
Or was the throttle still kind of going, and all of a sudden it just said nope? All of the controls rods and stuff are connected solidly.
Yeah, everything was good.
Okay.
I wasn't messing with the throttle. The only thing I can think, because I checked the battery afterwards, it was at 3.8 per cell, 3.8. So it wasn't. She wasn't at the point where she was losing power yet.
Right. Not with that plane.
I'm thinking that I had been doing a little bit of bank and yank maneuvering, setting up for the next approach. And I think I may have bled off too much airspeed in those maneuvers, and then was like had her up wing high, and she may have been going too slow, and when I went into that one, she just lost the lift completely. It's the only thing I can think, because the way she fell was very much there's no lift. And I cut the throttle before it hit the ground. So,
are you planning on putting the video somewhere where we could have the listeners look at it? Because they might be able to give us some tips on what they think it might be. I mean,
I wasn't planning on it because so much of the video doesn't have the plane in it, because the camera was aimed too high. You just kind of see it come into frame periodically. So, not really.
So then let me explain to the listeners briefly then. So when I was watching the video is set up so that basically the very bottom of the video is about eye level, maybe a little bit higher than eye level. So, some of this, you see it just fine. It's on the lower half of the screen, but you see the Spitfires flying around, and then the Spitfire just disappears because you're cutting grass, and then you'd you pop it up, and you'd see it come from way under the screen. And you could tell, you were low. You were really low. Yeah. Which is really neat. And then you'd see it come up and zoom around again and all that stuff. And when the motor gave out, it was pretty much dead center in the screen. I mean, I remember looking at that going that doesn't make any sense. It's like it just decided to say, all right, I'm done.
I'm done.
I'm out.
No idea.
Yeah, I don't know. So what was the aftermath of the crash then?
Broke the prop and took a chunk of the motor can, sort of the shell of the motor. Took a chunk of that out, which that's like softer aluminum that's up there anyway, it seems. But I took it back to the car, walked it back to the car. No other real damage other than it was nose first, so the nose is getting very soft at this point. But
you mean the foam?
I think I broke. Yeah, I think I broke the the barbecue skewer that was helping hold the motor up.
Probably.
So I replaced the prop, replaced that barbecue skewer, and got it back in the air. But in that time, I also changed the battery because I pulled it out, had a look. Cells are at 3.8. She was only going to have a couple minutes of flight in her at that voltage. So I said, well, let me pull the 4-cell out. I'll put a 3-cell in. It won't have the same power, but I'm not flying, full tilt, so it'll be fine.
You mean you're going to take it easy?
Yeah. Well, I knew I wanted to get back and do some more low flying because I was having fun with it.
Yeah.
And so I put the 3-cell in there, but I knew from the previous flight that I had it a bit nose heavy. So when I put the 3-cell in there, I said, oh, I'll just shift the battery back while I'm in here and, shift that CG back so that, she's not quite so nose heavy. I'll have an easier time on the low flights. And the mistake in all this and the takeaway is always CG your plane because I put the 3-cell in there, which is lighter, and I shifted it back.
Right. So what were you flying the first time? It was a 2200.
It was a 4-cell 2200.
Right. And then you replaced it with what, a 3-cell 1300?
Yes.
That's like
which
half
is a
the
considerable weight difference. Yeah.
That's like half the weight.
And I shifted it back.
And you shifted it back. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I put her in the air and I was commenting she, there's because I shifted the battery, there's that nose up trim I was adding on the 4-cell. There's that coming to bite me. So I was,
you forgot to zero out your trim again because it's a different go. With any luck, it's balanced right and should fly well. If the trim's zeroed out like it should be ready to go, you should have a great second flight. But again, if you forget that you trimmed the snot out of something, you're going to have those tendencies when you start the next flight.
Mm-hmm. So I should have checked the CG before I put her back in the air because I changed the battery, I repositioned it. But it's one of those few times when I said, I know what's happening. It's my plane. I know what's going on with it. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to skip this step because I knew it was nose heavy, so I'm just going to shift the battery back. It just completely forgot it's a lighter battery. So I didn't CG it. I shifted it back. It was tail heavy. I put it in the air. She was a little squirrely, but it was manageable. And I did some quick trimming, and I said, okay, she's good to go. And I brought her on I was kind of saying it's good as I was setting up the approach for the low pass.
Okay.
And then
I
let the nose drop to bring her in. And I don't know that the tail heavy side of this had anything to do with that. It was kind of cold that day. I was trying to change from thumb on top of stick flying to more the pinch style flying.
Oh, interesting.
And it was cold, not super cold, but getting a little chilly down here for us. And so my hands were cold and my head was in a bit of a funk. And I think just all around I was delayed reactions. Because I was just like, okay, I would do this approach for low flying, and here she comes, nose down, flying, and I just never pulled up.
Oh no!
Straight to the grass she went.
You pile drove her right in. Oh man!
And I think this might be, and that flight was only about a minute long, which was kind of the shameful part because she was flying so good. And I went out there that day saying, "It's going to be fine." I'm going to fly her gentle, I'm going to have a good time. I did the low fly, I had fun with it. I said, I'm going to do that again, and just didn't pull up.
How you managed to fly it well enough, that second flight is really beyond me. I know the Spitfire is very forgiving, but that should have been really far off.
I don't know.
Yeah, either way.
Except that I didn't have the only thing I say is I didn't have enough throttle to be experiencing a lot of the porpoising because she never really got enough power, enough lift to really get up there.
Okay.
But so I went and checked her out, had broke the prop again, so that one's shot.
Yeah.
And that time it really because I never even throttled back that time either. Like it was full, not full tilt, but it was just running all the way into the ground. So the power pod is like one side's completely ripped out where the barbecue skewer got it.
Yeah.
The other side, there's like this elongated hole.
Yeah.
Within the nose of the Spitfire, the top of the fuselage, that's where you push in the two barbecue skewers that the firewall hooks onto.
Mm-hmm.
That piece of foam is broken, accordioned, and shoved back. So like I can't even mount the power pod right now. Like I can, but there's no support for it. And get your chuckles. It's okay.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
But
that's okay. That's okay. That's actually fixable.
Maybe.
In the sense that so here's what it's part of what I did with the Tiger Cat, because when the Tiger Cat nosed in, that wing just sliced through the rest of the fuselage. It just kept going because all the weight is in the wings, right?
Oh man,
the fuselage has like nothing in it, so everything's on the wings. Needless to say, when it hit nose first, those wings just kept going, and it sliced through the whole front of the fuselage. So what I did was I literally cut out the chunks that had been destroyed, and I cut a new piece, almost like when you're repairing drywall. You cut out a piece and you leave a little bit of paper around the outside edge, and you kind of, glue up that outside piece and smush it in. And it's that old paper mushing in with the new stuff that ends up creating a pretty strong bond. So that's a way you basically cut out what's damaged, and you build a repair piece to glue in with enough overage on the paper on one side or the other, and when you're done, you have a stronger piece. Is it worth it?
I'm gonna look at it and see if it can be repaired. I think this time might actually be the final curtain on it. Like it's kind of done in there. I'll have a look at it.
Yeah,
I promise you that much.
Worst comes to worst, you can rebuild the whole nose. The whole front section. You can also rebuild the whole front section.
I could, but if I want to do that, I don't know. Because, like, the sides of the fuselage in the nose area are all boogered up and bowed and bent and creased outward.
I'm sure they are.
it took significant damage this time. Not that the prior two major crashes weren't. But
weren't contributing, but still.
Honestly, she's crashed into a fence and got snapped in half. The tail wrapped around to the front, where the only thing keeping the tail on the plane, like the back half on, was the paint on the paper. Then you fix that, and then it's been in an oak tree, had the wings ripped clean off. It's been repaired and missing a chunk out of the side of the fuselage. The ends of the wings are all jacked up. And now it's nosed into the ground. The power pod's jacked, which is no big deal to replace, but there's a lot of internal damage on the fuselage. Just saying, she might just be ready to retire at this point. Like truly, she's had a good life.
You put her through her paces for sure. Oh man. So okay, as you potentially retire this plane, it was a good ride, yeah?
I had a lot of fun with her, yeah.
Good. And now you just have an opportunity for a different plane.
Yeah.
Or the same one again.
Yeah, which I'm planning to rebuild the Spitfire.
Good.
If I can't fix this one, I'll build another one. And you get that ERC time save going, I'm gonna hit you up to cut me one.
Yeah, you're gonna be like knocking at my door. Hey, Matt. hey, buddy.
Joe, you live 2.5 hours away. Yeah, I thought I'd hop in the car and come see you.
I brought some foam with me. I was wondering. Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, so with all that done, and like I said, I'll have a look at it and see what's up. I flew it, and things have been busy since then, so I haven't really gone in to assess the damage other than what I've said so far. We're wanting to talk about recording your flying, and FPV. And I kind of talked a little bit that I was trying to record my last flight. I don't have the tripod, and I don't have a tripod for this phone. I don't have various equipment that I know you've got. So you're going to talk more on this, but I can say the recording I've done was one time, and literally I took 2 rubber bands and rubber banded my cell phone to my forehead and hit the record button on the camera and let her go. And it honestly it worked pretty good, except that my forehead has a slightly backward angle to it, so the camera was aimed further up than I was looking. And while I was trying to be aware of it, not only was I not holding my head down far enough, the camera was also, like the edge of the phone was also kind of blocking some of my upper vision, so I was really having to angle my head up to look up, and I looked I looked ridiculous out there with my phone strapped to my forehead. So
I know the feeling. Trust me.
Talk about recording and how we can not do what I was doing.
Well, you could put a piece of foam along the top half of your phone on the backside, and then it'll bring it more straight. But ideally, if you can get away from it. So you did essentially what a lot of people do, which is called like a hat cam. Is they'll get a small GoPro or like one of those. I bought a Polaroid Cube. I'm not endorsing that brand per se, but the idea is it's a form factor small, like 2-inch by 2-inch by 2-inch cube. You put in a TF card, and it runs for like an hour and a half, right? And you get like 1080p footage, which is pretty good, pretty good footage. Although nowadays everything's even better because that's the way technology is. But I mean, for capturing footage and to see what happened, especially with enough clarity to be able to diagnose issues, like if we wanted to figure out what happened with your Spitfire, you just upload that, that minute of it flying around and then it not flying around. Sometimes there's a lot more clues than you realize as a noob. And that's one of the reasons to record stuff. So if you're trying something new, to record it so that way if it goes right or wrong, you can look to see what happened later in more detail. Because when you're there on the sticks, you're just doing your best to keep the thing in the air, like or to fly it or to try to do whatever maneuver you're trying to do, or whatever. You're focused on what you're doing, and you may not be focused on other things that might be happening that you can't see until after the fact. So recording it sometimes could be a big help in diagnosing issues you might not realize you had. Especially if you're new and you're going like, what is wrong with my flights? Record a flight or two. I don't know, stick it up, lean it up against a rock or something on the ground, and just try to record as much of it as you can. And oftentimes, the more experienced guys can help you figure out what's going on, because we want to see guys up in the air. I say we like I'm more experienced, but I mean, I'm a couple years in, so I've got a little bit more experience. But generally speaking,
and you're decent at diagnosing certain things.
Yeah, some things. I'm brand new at so many other things. It's ridiculous. Anyway, but having those videos help. A lot of people I know on the FT forums and a lot of other places are like, look, you can tell us it happened, but until we've got video that says it happened, I don't believe you. And it's not that we don't believe you. Ultimately, we want to be able to see the footage and share the joy of success with you and laugh at the fun of the failure when that happens too. So that way we can commiserate, maybe help out. If nothing, just go, thanks for the entertainment. We appreciate that,
Right.
And it's more just to kind of share with the community. So having that there is sometimes really helpful. I know for me, when I'm doing the buddy box stuff with my kids, I like it just as a dad to be able to say, look at the times we had, that I'm having with my kids. Look at I don't get to see the joy that they have on their face when they're flying, and the oh no, oh gosh, I did it. That look that they, we all get it. You don't get to see that when you're in the middle of flying and making sure you're, as a buddy box trainer, you try not to let them crash. You don't want them to crash, so you're trying to worry about that. I don't get to see his joy until after I go and I look at the footage and I'm like, oh, look at that. Look at that. We're having a great old time. And I got to kind of relive it and capture it. So that's one of the reasons why I love doing it. If you start getting into videography, having a camera that's on a plane to be able to catch the scenery that's around you, you bring a plane to a destination. Like I went up to the mountains in out in North Carolina here, Western North Carolina, out in Hickory, actually, and right near one of it's like giant, man, I can't think of it. Anyway, beautiful view, great mountain vistas and things like that. So, like, I had a little drone with a camera on it that I could fly through the camera. But the cool part is I could take it off the balcony, kind of zoom around the little chateau that we were in, and I caught that beautiful vista. And while it wasn't the best camera, I could see if I had something that was a little bit more cinematic, just having a real good time sharing that with people who like, this is what the mountains of North Carolina are about. Like, this is why people love it, or if you're at the shore, like zooming along an ocean where the waves are crashing, like I could see that just being really cool and just being a great experience to share. So that's one of the reasons that I know of to be able to do it. What would you be doing it for, Joe? Anything to add to that list?
Really just sharing. Sharing the flight experience. And I know the guys in the in our Discord share videos semi-regular of stuff they're flying.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, like, I know you want to see me fly.
I do.
You get to hear the stories and they're funny, but we could also watch the video together and be like, oh yeah, this is where that thing happened, and we can laugh together.
Mm-hmm. And we've used it to diagnose some things too, and it's been pretty helpful. So yeah, it really is a great way to kind of share the thing. I love this hobby. So to be able to, people don't really see why I love it until I go, check this out. Here's me flying from the cockpit of my plane, having a blast. Check it out. Although I'm not doing anything crazy, this is so free. This feels like I'm flying right now. And it really brings a joy like you may not even know. And to pass that to friends and family who are like, why are you so into this hobby? Be like, this is why. Check this out. And they're like, well, that's pretty cool. And then they're like, wait, that's from your plane? Like, yeah. And actually, I'm flying it with that view. Like, I'm flying it from that view. And they're like, what, you can do that? I'm like, yeah. Check it out.
And like some of the first person video you showed me when we were out flying and you had it on your Spitfire, like it brings out from me like what it is about aviation in general. I think that I love the most, which is the view from that angle. Like you're up there and you're looking at it, and the view's just so different. You can see so far, and you're just up there.
Yeah. So, like a bird just hanging out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's something I've really enjoyed. And it's the tough part is that it requires a number of steps. I was in a chat talking to some people who were talking about how to, because it was like a brand new guy who's like, I want to get into wings, race flying. I want to get FPV. I want to, I want to be able to just hit the button and have it do a whole thing and fly along with it and all this stuff. And I was like, that's awesome. Again, I love that too, and I'm in, and I'm just getting there. But you have to. It's unfortunately and I don't want to discourage you, but it's a process, because what you don't want to do is not know your equipment, not know what's going on, not know how to fly or how to recover, and just be like hoping everything works. And you get, let's say, you're doing a long range FPV mission that's done through basically a flight computer, and something goes wrong, you have to recover that. You have to know how to bring it back home or bring it down to the ground safely, and all the what ifs and whatnots to be able to deal with that, right? So while he wants to get there, that's awesome. You still need to test your plane, right? Is this a good platform? Is this solid? Does my plane perform like it's supposed to? Can I control it from the ground? If I'm looking at it, can I fly it from a pepper speck out there and bring it back home? Can I?
If the camera fails.
Right. If the camera fails, can I pull it off and just hope to God I can find the dang thing? Hope the return to home can bring it close enough where I can fly it the rest of the way, or what? Like what's going on, right? And that's disregarding, and we'll get into the FAA regulations and a lot of the AMA guidelines that go along with flying safely. But basically, you can fly it as far as you can see it, which can be really far. But and I've had a glider plane so far out it was a pepper speck. I could still see it, and I flew it home. But I'll tell you what, it was a challenge like I'd never had before, because it was literally watching a sky, and be like, "Where is the plane?" Be like, "Okay, so imagine a pepper speck or a pepper speck. There we go, thrown way out in the sky somewhere. It's over there. Look for it." They're like, "Oh, there it is." How do you know what direction it's going? I'm like, I generally watch where it's going in relation to the clouds. And so I think it's going that way. I can't tell if it's going towards me or not.
I think you were a little too far out, Matthew.
Well, it was no, and ultimately, what I'd do is I'd bank and I'd wait and I'd watch it kind of come around, because it's a glider. It'll kind of level out and it'll come one way or the other. And then I use that information to go, okay, it's coming towards me. It's about this high. It's flying level. Everything's good. And again, the motor's off. I'm just gliding it around. I'm looking for a thermal. I'm looking to just hang out. So all I'm doing is just trying to bring it a little bit closer so I can see more. But that's about as far as you can get. Like, to be any more than any less than a pepper speck, and you're out of compliance. Now, if you have goggles on, the problem is if they go out, you pull those things off, you need somebody to tell you where the heck your plane is. Because you're probably facing a completely different direction than where your plane is. Unless you are like, oh, I know where it is. It's over the farm. This is where looking at one of the wonders of Google Earth or Google Maps is be able to pull that bird's eye view and see what should I be seeing from my plane if it's out that way. Like, I'm flying that general direction. I should know what I'm looking at, so I generally know where it is, so that way I know where to look if something goes wrong. Like, to go through those things, like you check your equipment, make sure your equipment works, make sure you know how it responds, make sure to understand what the fail-safes are, and then eventually getting to that point where you can just fly like a passenger in a plane, which is cool, but it's a lot of steps to get there. And one of them is to get to this FPV. Get to first-person view. And all I've been trying to do is get to where I can take my plane with an FPV camera and my goggles that can allow me to see first-person from the plane, throw my plane out there, put on the goggles, and have a blast flying around the field. And I've only just now, after 3 years, I've made a couple of attempts, and I've enjoyed some FPV flying, but there's only been a couple of platforms that I've felt confident in, and systems that I felt okay with, that I can send it up and I know what it's going to do, and I know how to fly it, and I know what kind of failures it's likely to have, and then how to handle them, so that if something goes wrong while I'm up there, I can bring it back, or I can bring it to the ground safely without hurting somebody. And usually when I'm doing it out in the 40-acre field of corn or whatever, soybean. So, I have a long way to go before I actually get towards somebody.
Depending on which way you're flying, yeah.
Exactly. So, okay, so the goal is, to record what you're doing, One of the ways is to do FPV. So if you fly first person view, that signal gets sent to a goggle that can record it, or you can have a little thing that literally a camera that you just basically rubber band on your plane or Velcro, or I magnetize it. So I basically use a couple magnets and stick it on. And basically that camera oftentimes can have a recorder on it. So that way it's recording the footage in high definition.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're done, you kind of pull that footage off, and it's like the footage that was getting sent to you in FPV in the goggles. So they're oftentimes one and the same. They could be separate. I know a lot of drone flyers will have, or racer flyers, they'll have the camera that's used up until recently. The cameras weren't good enough, but they would have one camera that basically sends signal to their goggles that's kind of low def, and then they have like a run cam that they basically attach in. They have like a little saddle that they attach it in, and then they take that run cam, which is a pretty heavy thing relatively speaking. They take the run cam and they take that footage, and that's what they put online. So when you're seeing these racers who are flying this amazing, perfect, beautiful footage, it's not the footage they're racing with. Again, until recently, they really have only been able to do like kind of low def, almost like the old school analog signal where you get the fuzz across and the lines that run down as you're flying, like almost like the vert is screwed up, like in the old TV sets.
Yeah, like the VCR when your what was it? Your
The
tracking was
tracking,
off.
yeah, the tracking is
Yep.
off, and all of a sudden it was zero,
I
zero.
remember adjusting that a couple times.
Exactly. So I mean, and so that's oftentimes what they're racing with, is they're making split-second decisions at, God, it must be like 80 miles an hour, going through these tight courses on FPV footage. It looks like you're looking through the limited channels, the pay channels, on an old TV set. You're
Yeah.
just, what the heck is this stuff? This is crazy. Anyway, but oftentimes I'll have the second footage. So that's one of the tactics, is to have a really good camera. And even in the old days, people would literally strap a camera to a plane. Just like an old school press the button, click camera. They would literally, rubber band that son of a gun on the front of their plane. And that's how they would capture footage, right? And thankfully, things have kind of scaled down, and they've had the flight enthusiast in mind, the RC flight enthusiast in mind, when they recreate some of these platforms that we use. If you're going to use your phone, the cameras we have on our phones are better than any camera I've ever had in my whole life up until recently, right? The only other camera I've ever had that's been better has been these HD cameras that go on the planes. But otherwise, my camera is excellent on my phone. So I'll just use that. So I ended up buying a couple of those, bendable arm tripods with the little extendable clip cameras, and they basically clip around your phone, and you can hang it on stuff. You can set it up like a regular tripod. And so those are great for static shots. Oftentimes I'll set it kind of at one end of the field, and I'll have it looking down at the field, mostly towards the air, because that's where the subject is going to be. And if I'm smart, after the plane is in the air, if there's nobody else around, I'll walk over to the camera so that if I'm making comments, it gets recorded. So the benefit of that is there's audio that goes with that. I have the hat cam, so basically that's that little, looks like a little GoPro, and there's a magnet on the bottom of it, so I have a hat clip that I 3D print. It goes on any baseball cap. I put a little metal plate on there, and I just attach it to that. And generally the angle's wide enough on the view that it's facing generally the right direction. I'll capture whatever footage I'm looking for as if it were me doing what I'm doing.
Right.
So, and it's lightweight. So what I'm sure you occurred with your phone is that's heavy. Your phone's pretty heavy, even if it's strapped to your head. If you were to put it on a hat, it'd take a hat right off, is what I found. That's what I was trying to do, is strap it to a hat. And that didn't work. So I decided to go with a lighter camera. So those cube form cameras aren't a bad choice. They're not going to give you great audio. So if you're looking to do a more professional video, you will likely have to do audio after the fact. Or you'll have to have a separate recorder doing something.
That little cuboid camera you have generally seems to be giving you a hard time. Do you know what that's about? Is it that just the model you have, or
That's a good
because it's only
question.
got like what, one button on it that you're using to kind
Yep.
of
It's
power it
it.
on, turn it off, start the recording, stop it.
Yep. Yeah. It's like a water resistant case that's semi indestructible. It's got a magnet on the bottom, and it has the one button, like you said. And then you press it a certain amount of time, and it turns it on and off. You press it short, and it takes a picture. You press it long, and it'll start and do it again to stop the recording. It's simply that. It's got a very small battery, and I don't know if maybe the battery got damaged somewhere along the way or what. I'm about to take it apart to see if it's the recording device itself that's doing something. Like I've double checked to make sure it's not the card that's filling up or something. Because every time I
Right.
get to it, the camera as the card is basically at best a quarter full, so it's not
Mm-hmm.
filling it up. So that's disappointing. So I think it, and I actually went through 3 of them to get one that worked properly. So I'm not surprised that there's a malfunction. And while I'm disappointed, I don't have a problem. It's like $20, so I don't mind taking it apart to see if I can get it to work. Because what would be
Right.
ideal is if I can take that power and power it from the receiver board or from a BEC that's hooked through the battery, because that would be ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Is do it that way, and then I could then I could run it nonstop without any issue, and then it would record top quality video, and it'd be semi indestructible except for this one cord that comes out maybe.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm going to figure that out, but the Run Cam is basically the slightly bigger, much heavier version of the nearly indestructible camera. And this is a similar kind of style. It's just all it is just a security camera. One of those
Hmm.
little micro security cameras where you can hide it and nobody will see, kind of stuff. Like, and
Right.
well, that might be great for around the house to do that, but um, I I just want to fly with the thing so I get some good footage.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
so I mean, those are ways to get that footage from the ground, and or small enough to be able to put it onto a plane, but that's relatively clunky compared to some of the things that are out there. So RunCam used to have like and they still have it. It's basically a single unit that's just like a elongated rectangle cube thing that you just press a button and it records. And that's it. That's all it's for. And a lot of people put Velcro, and they'd either Velcro it to the hat, Velcro it to a plane. They move it around, and it's about $80. It gives you 1080p footage, 30 frames or 50 frames a second, 60 frames, depending on which model you're
It's not
getting.
terrible.
But it's pretty expensive, and if I'm throwing it on a plane, I'm not looking to break it. Like $20. I'm more likely to go, oh, that sucks. I lost it.
Right.
$80. I'm gonna start taking an extra look or four before I stop looking. Um, so the other options you have are put a video transmitter and a camera on your plane, and then that sends signal to a receiver ground station that then records it there. So
But that has the possibility to incur other issues.
right. The problem is if there's any interference between the transmission and the receiving signal, you're going to record that.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes when you see my FPV footage, if I put up any, you're going to see what I see through the goggles. So I'm recording what's being received by the goggles. Now there are ways to make sure that it is minimal interruption. There's a thing called diversity where it has more than one antenna, and it basically continuously compares which signal is the best signal, and it'll basically pick the antenna that's receiving the best signal. And so what you can do is you can put 3 or 4 different types of antennas. So you can have a general around receiving antenna, which will pick up things in like an apple shape over your head, or you can do something that's more like a cone. It looks like a spiral with a copper backplate. It really doesn't look much like that, but you some of them do, and you basically put those, or they look like a flat plate. And what they do is they have like a 45-degree frontward focus, or if they're a spiral, they tend to, the longer the spiral, the tighter the view, the tighter the receiving signal, the receiving cone.
Okay.
But by reducing the actual coverage of the receiving antenna, you're also increasing the length at which it can receive a signal from. So when people are doing long range, they know where they're going to go. So they know, like, if I'm pointed in that direction, I don't need the other 300 degrees. If I get a camera that's only like 60 degree, or if I get an antenna that only receives from 60 degrees, I can have it go miles out and receive a signal really strong. So if I've got one of those and I've got one that's generally like that apple shape that's around you, because it's covering everywhere, it's pretty short distance in the sense that it's, maybe 1,000 feet or 300 feet, or depending on a bunch of other things. But basically, you get one that covers around you and one that is pinpointed out to where you're going to fly. And what happens is the antenna will say, hey, it's really strong while you're close. It'll be strong in that apple sphere. And then as you go further out, it'll drop off it will say, that's not the best signal, right? And then it'll only take the stuff that's in that cone. But if you fly outside your cone, you're out of luck. You're not receiving any signal at all until you turn your head and figure out where your stuff's coming from. And I mean, I don't want to go. It's a rabbit hole that can go really, really deep. But basically, you have a receiving unit on your head that transmits a signal to little TVs in a goggle, and through reflective magic, they're like right in front of your eyeballs. But it allows you to look into these goggles and be wherever that camera that's sending the signal is, and that's what you're looking out of. And the transmission time between the signal sent from the camera to getting received by the goggles into your eyes and for you to process it and respond is low enough for you to race with the drone going at 80 miles an hour around a course.
Which is pretty impressive.
Which is very impressive. We're talking microseconds or milliseconds, right? And then when you're talking about long range, obviously the response time is the further you go out, the longer the response time, the more you can actually tell I'm giving input. I'm not seeing if that's happening for a little bit of time. You can see the lag. There'll be a visual difference. Like your radio is transmitting the same speed as all the other stuff coming to your eyeball, but you actually have to, you transmit out. It does the work, and then it sends a signal to your eye. Like, so it goes out and back. So you're getting like twice the difference of lag. To be able to try to control it, you want to make sure that you have that loop has to be small enough where you can, you can accommodate for any lag that might happen. So when you're dealing with long distance, it starts, you got to fly a little bit differently, but it's something that I'm looking forward to getting deeper into. I haven't gotten too far in it yet, but
You're
at
a
the
lot
point.
deeper than I am.
Well, it's something I've been interested in, and I don't even know why, because I don't have anything I'm eager to go do. I think the places I want to go fly, I think it's illegal. I think most state parks, they don't allow you to just go out and take a plane and fly around, because that would be amazing. Anyway, so one of the ways to record is if you have your goggles, have a basically recorder, a DVR, and it basically records the signal that's coming in, and it saves it to a file that you can use later. You could also have a separate receiving unit. It doesn't actually send anything to your eyes, just takes the signal in and receives it. So the neat thing about FPV is that you have a camera that's just transmitting image signal. And anybody who can tune into that signal's frequency can pick up that signal. So they can fly with you.
Okay.
So while I was
so
flying, I was going to say, so while I was flying, if I was confident in enough in it, I could have had my goggles on flying my plane through the nose of the toucan. And my girlfriend's father could have been in those box goggles watching along with me because he's tuned into the same frequency. Think of it like that little camera is a little TV station. Transmitting signal, only goes out about a mile. And as long as you tune into that right frequency, you can pick up and enjoy it too. You may not have the radio to be able to control the plane, but you can enjoy the flight.
You can enjoy it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how many, and this is more of a technical question, but how many channels are available within the spectrum that FPV runs in? Because I don't know how many different guys you can have out there flying at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you need to take a moment if you see other guys out FPV, and do you need to take a moment and ask them, hey, what channel are you on? And should you be like one channel, at least one channel off of them? Should you be 2 or 3 channels off of them? Because I know with like FM, you can start getting some bleed over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that is part of what happens. So there's, I think, I'm trying to count. I think there's about 5 or 6 bands, and each band has 8 channels, right?
Okay.
So you can have, I think, up to 48. Maybe it's 6. I think it's like 48 channels, 48 individual locations that you can send signal on. Basically, little band segments that you can choose from the very narrow band of 5.8. That's also it's sent out on a 5.8 gigahertz, which so while you're doing that, if you're in a neighborhood, you're competing with every Wi-Fi signal that pretty much every house is spewing out.
The newer networks, yeah.
Right.
We
or
can
and
run
or
in.
2.4.
Well, I'd double check. I thought the Wi-Fi routers were running at 5 gigahertz, not 5.8.
Right, and they may be off just enough, and they probably are, but there's enough noise where it starts to interfere. But generally speaking, well, for the most part, you're okay. So theoretically, every one of those channels you can have an individual on. The problem is that signal tends to bleed on the neighboring channels. So if you've got a possible 48 channels, you really have about 24 people you can have in the air on their own channel.
Right,
And
separated
not have
out
any.
enough.
Right. And then and if you're you're going to have that much going on, you need to have somebody who's in control of, much like the old radio, the AM band radios of the old system. Like you had to say, I've got the A band crystal. Like nobody can fly on that, because if you do, you're going to be flying my plane, and that's not okay. So you have to do that kind of. So it's very much the old check where you got to say, hey, I'm flying on this channel. I'm doing this thing. Not too many people do FPV where I fly, so I never really have to run into running up and down like who's flying FPV. You can look. Nobody's got goggles on. You're the only guy. So at Flight Test, there's a designated spot where you can, like when you go to Flight Fest, like there's one guy who's running the drone event, the drone racing event. They're typically only on race band, but what you do is you say, hey, I need to borrow a band for an hour. I want to fly FPV at the airfield. And they say, okay, cool. You got band L1. Go. I mean, you've got L1 until you come back saying, okay, I'm done. You basically check it back in, almost like a library. So there's a lot of different ways to work that. One of the other things, this is one of the big innovations. What is it? Oh, now I'm going to blank on his name. He's one of the innovators. It's like he eats and breathes radio signal. He just gets it. So he came up with the idea of, if you're sending out signal and you have these right-hand polarized. You typically have a linear polarized where it's basically like a duck antenna. It's basically straight up. It's what most antennas have. But they've decided that if you can go out and do a spiral mushroom, it sends out a signal in one pattern. It isn't picked up by any antennas that go the left-hand spin. So you basically spin the antenna frequency, for lack of a better way to put it, which means if the next channel is a left-hand spin, the first one was a right, the next one is a left, the left one will not bleed into the neighboring channel if it's right-handed. So what you do is you can compact, instead of having 24, you can space them even tighter, but if you're on an odd channel, you have to be left, and if you're on an even, you go right. And obviously somebody has to coordinate all that. But you can pack more people in where the video doesn't bleed. It actually is bleeding, but it doesn't get picked up by the oppositely polarized video signal. So what happens is you basically have the antenna that's on the camera station, right, is right-hand polarized. Much like glasses, right? They're polarized.
No, what you're saying is that there's some black magic going on here, and
oh man,
this guy's figured it out. So,
oh, I want to say it's Stone Blue Airlines. Shoot, I'd be crazy, is his handle, and he is awesome. I mean, his radio stuff is tremendous. If once I start going to do long range stuff, I'm definitely going to be picking up some of his antennas. I'm blanking on his name. It's driving me crazy. I'll do my best to put together a link. But basically, he figured out that you can fit more racers together at a racetrack if you have everybody on an even channel do right hand and everybody on an odd channel do left hand polarized. And so what happens is the right hand polarizing signal sent from the camera in the drone gets sent to, and it only gets picked up by right hand polarized receivers.
mm-hmm.
So what happens is if every, and if that signal channel only bleeds into neighboring channels, if those neighboring channels are polarized oppositely, it's like the sunlight, where you can't pick it up. It's 90 degrees to itself, and then you hear nothing. So It becomes crystal clear. There's no interference, and you can fly more people in less space. So, like, what? That's so cool. Just like, what? This is the best. That was a really long explanation of some what I'm getting at is, there's a lot to it, but at the same point, let me break down what you need. You need a camera on your plane, which there's a whole range of cost and size and shape and all that stuff, but you can easily get in what's called an all-in-one. It basically has a camera that's attached to the video transmitter. So basically you have a camera, you have a video transmitter, and you need a power source. And then so basically as part of that, you can run that out to the receiver. I've done that on some of my planes. The other ones, I have a battery connector, and I use like a single cell. Oftentimes they only require 5 volts. Anywhere between 3 volts to 5 volts to run. So you basically power it up with a small single cell battery, or you can run it off of your receiver, which is pulling the battery power. And then that's what you have on your plane. And then on the ground, you have basically have a video system. It has receiver system with antennas that are matched to basically what you have in the air. And then those basically they decode the signal and send it as an image to an LCD screen. And depending on what,
to an SD card if you're recording.
Or to an SD card. Right. The difficulty with while you're recording is it depends on, like, if you are recording on the plane, you're getting video signal, and if it has to process recording and then send it out, oftentimes the lag becomes too noticeable for most things. So oftentimes they won't do recording and transmitting at the same time.
Right.
Some manufacturers have worked a way around that. They've figured out how to basically say, you're going to send signal twice. One's going to the recorder, which it just records, and the other one is simultaneously also sending it to the transmitter. so that way one is not impeding the other.
Mm-hmm.
I think is what's happening there. And then that gets sent to your goggles. The goggles show you what's happening, and then you correspondingly change what you want with the sticks, and then it goes to the plane, and then you get to see the response of that. And that's in the order of microseconds. Like, so it's sometimes you can see the lag, but it's really hard to tell, especially on a plane. Like if you're flying at 80 or 100 miles an hour, you might start to really see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I don't know how much of it would be any different than if you were on the ground.
Yeah, at least you're on board where left is left and right is right.
yeah, that's it's all good until the power goes out. Like I was flying a glider
Yeah.
and I think I ran low on the battery, and the camera signal went dead.
Oof.
And I went, oh crud! So I like threw off the goggles, and that's I need glasses to see long range. So once I pulled the goggles off, I had to put my glasses back on before I could start looking around the sky and find my plane. Because without my glasses, the sky looks like the sky. I wouldn't be able to tell you if there's a bird in it or not without my glasses. So,
And you were talking about powering it. We had talked about this a little earlier before we were like a couple days ago.
mm-hmm.
But sometimes you pick up static in your image, and I know that's transmission and receiving and all. But you said that something that makes sense once you said it. But you're talking about having your power for your FPV camera like its own dedicated source, as opposed to pulling power off the receiver power
Right.
bar, power
Right.
bus. What's going on there?
Right. So if you have your motor is pulling power through the electronic speed controller, and that speed controller is sending power to your receiver, which is then passing it along to your video system, right? As the motor is pulling all the power out, it's draining what it can send out to the receiver, and it's trying desperately to keep it to 5 volts. Oftentimes, there's a lot of electrical noise that happens in an ESC with all the different switching process, and it creates a lot of, we'll call it noise. And that battery noise, that electronic noise, gets transmitted through the battery lines all the way through to the video transmitter and the camera, mostly the video transmitter. So what happens is those magnetic pulses, that electricity creates small magnetic waves, and those affect the video signal, and they will affect the camera. And so as you power up, you'll see oftentimes you'll see that the camera image goes kaputs for a little bit, and then you kind of throttle back. So instead of like punching it, if you eased up, it'd be okay. But if you punch it, that change in current creates a magnetic field that interferes with everything briefly. And so as you're doing that, you can't see anything, and then you throttle back. It's all good. The signal returns. So what happens is your motor energy, the energy you're pulling through the motor, is affecting your video signal. And there's a way to clean that up. You basically put this thing called a rectifier in the middle, and that basically isolates that electric noise that's running through the battery lines from the ESC or the power lines from there, and it's isolating it. So it's not going to travel up into the video system, and it keeps that clean, and then your image stays very solid. And it's a really tiny part that probably weighs about 2 grams.
Or you give it its own dedicated 1 or 2 cell.
Well, whatever it requires. And then just know that you're going to have to put an extra battery on it. And it'll probably be pretty close. But they're pretty lightweight. Most bigger planes won't ever even notice the difference. It's only when you're dealing with smaller planes like the Cessna T-37. When you're looking at a 20-inch plane, it'll notice the difference if you're adding an extra battery. But if you're looking at the Tiger Cat don't care. Tiger Cat's got lift for days, so it depends on what you're flying.
If we ever get the spruce goose in the air, it won't care.
Oh, baby, that spruce goose will not care at all. It will not care. Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think, one of the benefits of having a camera is oftentimes when it turns towards the sun, it kind of auto adjusts. Sometimes that can be good. Most of the time, sometimes it can be bad, right? If it's adjusted wrong, or the response, the way the camera's responding, isn't accurate, right? And then so it ends up blocking everything out. But oftentimes it'll put a black spot where the sun is because it just can't handle that, and everything else is just lit like normal. And so what happens is you can fly right into the sun or away from the sun or whatever, and it's all the same, which is awesome. Because when I fly towards the sun and I don't have sunglasses, that's just a recipe for losing a plane.
It's a booger.
Yeah, man, it's rough. Um,
It's I mean, I've flipped the side of the field I fly on because of the sun. So
exactly. Yeah,
which
good
summertime
choice.
won't be so bad, but this wintertime it sinks low.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, when you get out there, it's already almost eye level, right?
yep. Does that kind of cover FPV and sort of
Yeah.
recording? I know recording was a real small segment on the front end. We really just were
I mean,
diving into FPV, but
yeah, by hook or by crook is really how you record it. um,
however you can do it.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
I'm I'm going to end up strapping that. I'm going to end up strapping the phone to my forehead again, but I'm going to probably, I don't know, take another rubber band, kind of mush it up into a ball and set it back there behind the
Hmm.
screen against my forehead. Something to, or a piece of
Tilted.
foam or a
Yeah.
piece of paper folded up just to tilt that thing forward. Because I like the idea, like dumb as I know I'm going to look, I like the idea that when I move my head, it's going to go like that's going to be recording for me for a little while once I figure it out.
Yeah.
And
Well, because you already
largely
have it.
because
Like it's already there. You have it with you every time you go. It's almost
hmm
always charged up or easy to charge up. It's got plenty of storage, and the footage is high quality. So, I mean, that's a recipe for super winning. The only downside to that is it's heavy, and it looks awkward. That's.
I got a big head, so I got big neck muscles. I'll be all right.
Okay, so I think the only last thing I want to talk about with this um, is generally expense, right? If you're new and you kind of want to get into it, you're going to look around. You're going to like, oh, this is great. So most of the time, like the low end stuff, you're going to. My advice is if you buy a goggle set, buy as much as you can afford, but like at minimum, get diversity. Like I've got those VR 007s. They are single antenna. There's no diversity. So when the signal gets interference, I'm out until it comes back in, right?
hmm
Whereas diversity, I can have a different type of antenna that picks up better for certain things. And that way, when one doesn't pick up a good signal, the other one probably might be good at that, right? Like a mushroom antenna. They look like basically half spheres sticking on a stick.
Right.
They cover all around you, and I have a patch antenna that does 45 degrees in front of me for a pretty good distance. So what happens is if I can fly mostly in front of me, the signal will be great until they get close to me. In which case, if I accidentally fly behind me or something like that, I'm likely going to be near me. So that mushroom covers the rest. The antennas tend to be about $15. The goggles will probably be the low end I've seen tends to be about 80, and the sky is the limit. Like right now, the DJI digital goggles, and they come with the camera system with the transmitter and the goggle set with 4 antenna diversity things. Are super duper. Those are $1,000, right? So
Phew.
yeah, that's. Trust me, they've been something I've been interested in, but they've been pretty. Yeah, they're out of reach for me. But the Sky Zones were about 3. You can find a very good, like very good. Um, I'll call it entry level that'll service most people for pretty much their entire flying career at about $350. And I know that's kind of expensive, but you can also get box goggles. You can make your own. You need a screen and a diversity antenna. And if you want to be creative, you can do it for a lot less. I know Banggood and other places sell parts and pieces. Um,
Gotta make
Um,
sure your soldering skills on point.
oh, baby, ain't that the truth? Um, so, right, if you're going to do that, practice your soldering. Let's see the other, and the camera itself. So you can buy the Eachine TX03 or the all-in-one cameras, where it has a camera, it has a transmitter. All it does is you're looking for a power out signal. You don't have to worry about the wiring because it's pretty much all set. All you have to do, if you can get the power to it, it's good to go. Those run like I saw them on sale for $10, but they typically run between $20 and $25. If you get them from Amazon, they can have them to you with Amazon Prime tomorrow for like $25. Like they're called Woof Whoop or Whoop cameras. So basically, they're designed for these little Inductrix, um, tiny like these little tiny drones that weigh maybe 32 grams. The camera itself weighs an extra 5, and you hook it up to the power of the drone, and the idea is that way you can fly inside like you're racing a racetrack, but that's your house is your racetrack.
Hmm.
Which is really fun. Probably the biggest difficulty is the goggles, and it's kind of like a transmitter. Once you buy one, you don't
You're
need
good
one.
for a while.
You're good for a long while. You're basically just setting up a receiving station. There are people who've literally set up an antenna receiving station that goes to an old laptop monitor in a case that they bought a case from like Harbor Freight or something, and they mounted the TV in there. And then there's like a lipo battery that they plug in to power it, 12 volt, and then they literally run the receiver out to this antenna station they put on a tripod out there. And that thing has like 6 different antennas and a bunch of switching and diversity things, and literally some of them have trackers that'll literally it'll detect which antenna is getting a stronger signal, and it'll rotate towards that stronger signal until they even out. So
Yeah.
so basically,
Jeez.
like as you're flying, it's turning to where you're flying, so it gets the strongest signal possible. So instead of having
Right.
like 6 different antennas, you really just have 2 and a motor that kind of moves it around to, which is great. I mean, it's crazy, but like this is how much fun it is that people have invested that kind of time, energy, desire, research to get this to be easy, possible, and reliable.
Right.
It's really interesting. And I'm just now kind of getting to that spot where the other day I was flying with the boys, and when we did our buddy box stuff, my son flew. That's what we didn't really talk about. He flew 3 different batteries through, which was awesome. He flew one as a 4-cell, and then the other 3 cells. And he ran through every single one of the batteries. We didn't crash the plane, and he even
Well,
showed me
good
that he
on
could,
him.
because he was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm like, dude, just do 2 circuits. Just fly him nice and easy, and just like a little circle. Just roll from one end of the field to the other. It's like, okay. He did it. He did it perfect. He did
That's
it with ease.
boring.
He's like, okay, cool. And then we immediately went up in the air. He did like a turnover loop thing, and he dove down to the ground like he's doing a dive bomb. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to crash the plane. And, I ended up taking over and just like, oh my God, son, you're giving me a heart attack. I said, I love that you're enjoying this. He goes, I wasn't going to pull out. I'm like, but you didn't tell me you were going to do a dive bomb. So I had no idea what was going on. He's like,
I
oh,
thought you
sorry,
just
Dad.
lost control.
Yeah. Sorry, Dad. I'm like, that's all right. I said, just next time if you're going to do that, tell me that that's what you're doing, and we'll give it a try. And he ended up getting to the point where he asked me if he could bring it in for landing. So the battery beeper started to beep, and we brought it in. So in the middle of one of those, I said, son, I need to be my spotter. So I'm going to fly this FPV. I said, so if something goes wrong and I need your help, I need you to help me tell me how to get the plane down. He's like, oh, okay, I can do that. So I brought it up and I put on the goggles and I let it go, and off I went, and I flew because the Spitfire's, it's reliable and good. And I flew a whole battery on FPV, and it was actually, I ended up flying it a lot more docile than I would if I didn't have the goggles on.
Hmm.
I think it's because when you do loops and rolls and all that kind of stuff, it's very easy to get disoriented and lose track of where the ground is. And
Yeah.
it could be a problem. Anyway, so I'm sure that the listeners will hear more about FPV stuff as I go. Um, and as we get a little bit deeper, one of the neat things that can be an add to that is there's a thing called a three-way switch. You basically plug it into one of the channels in your receiver, and it's a switch that allows you can basically put in three different camera feeds, and then there's an out that goes to the transmitter, the video transmitter. And so you can
Okay.
have three different cameras on your plane, and you can remotely switch between the three different views. So if you're flying,
Interesting.
you can basically have, you have your main pilot, then you can have your gunner, then you can have your wing, your wing view, or out back on the tail. So, um, anyway, there's a lot of fun that could be had with FPV, is what I'm getting at. I know I'm looking forward to seeing more, and I hope, Joe, you can get into it a little bit more as
Hopefully,
we
at some
go.
point. Like, I would love to.
Yeah.
I'm just continuing
Uh,
to keep hobby costs to a minimal as much as possible.
Ain't that the truth? I feel like you. I feel like you'd probably be more comfortable in the goggles than you would be flying from the ground.
Probably.
All right.
But speaking of FPV and all that, we said earlier we've got that you've got some FAA news that you heard about. Do you
Yep.
want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, and it's going to be really quick, only because um, it's just two big things that kind of came through. The FAA back in February was putting out an issue of regulation change, and people went and responded. I think if you listen to some of the first episodes, I briefly covered it. Um, but basically, since we've all made, those who made comments made a lot of them, the FAA has heard that and taken it into account, or not, as the FAA might. It is their job to regulate, so that is their, they're required to go through and respond to, at least read everything that we've sent in. Hopefully, it's taken into account. And it seems like there was I wish I could remember where. I didn't note where I heard I think it was DJI is releasing a new drone, and as they release a new drone, there was some leak about how the FAA might be changing the regulation to just be a carte blanche, don't fly over 300 feet, but we don't care how heavy it is for the
Hmm.
RC hobbyist, and making it that's just the rule, and we'll call it good. So you don't need to have the transponder, you don't need to have the remote ID or anything like that. Just don't fly over 300 feet. We're good.
Which is pretty
Obviously,
high up there anyway.
yeah. For most craft, other than gliding, 300 feet is plenty. Your plane gets awful small at 300 feet. Um,
Hmm.
and then I think if you're, and then the next piece of news kind of leads to the other half of FAA regulation. If you are flying and making money off of it as a business, you are not flying recreationally, you are flying commercially. And FAA requires that you have a Part 107 permit. Part 107, is it a permit? Well, I'm going to call it a permit. I know it's probably wrong.
License.
Yeah, Part 107 license. Um, and that Part 107 allows you to basically fly as a, and make money in something that goes in the air. It's basically, the requirements of it are that you understand and conform to some basics, which are don't fly over people, don't understand the airspaces, don't fly into restricted airspaces, register your flight before you go. So basically, you're letting the FAA know what you're going to do and where
Hmm.
you're going to fly. And they currently use a LANC system, LAANC. I don't know what it stands for. Anyway, so you basically let them in on what's going on. You have gone through the education that they require, that you understand the rules of the air, and that you're going to fly safely and responsibly, and that you have responsibility. So if you do something that hurts other people, you will be held liable for things that happen. And that you make yourself and your craft that you're flying identifiable to those who might get harmed by it, right? If it crashes, somebody can pick it up and say, you broke my window, FAA number blankety blank. And they go to the FAA and say, who's blankety blank? They broke my window. Here's the repair bill. And then they go figure it out. Hopefully that's as bad as it ever gets. Anyway,
Right.
so that's part 1 of 7. So if you're doing something to make money with your flying, there's part 1 of 7, right? As long as you're not, if it's beyond recreational. Again, they're looking to change all the rules, so I don't know what the rules. Currently, they're basically don't go over 400 feet, don't fly over people, fly responsibly, and be safe.
And again, even with this news, like, this is a possibility. So we're going to have to just see how it all pans out.
Yeah, and we'll update you as we
once
go.
all the regulation gets done.
Mm-hmm. Right, and again, they're looking. It's coming out, like it's coming one way or the other. Something's going to happen, and it's tough because I'm excited about the idea of it just being a straightforward, simple, hey, don't fly this over this height, and it's a reasonable height for for a remote enthusiast. That height is reasonable.
And
with any luck,
I mean, honestly, if it came down the pipeline like that, just 300-foot ceiling and everything else.
Don't fly it near an airport.
You don't have to have special, like, we don't have to do all the other
register. No remote
cool.
system. Yeah. And if the rules are basically don't fly over 300 feet, don't fly over people, don't fly within 5 miles of an airport.
Cool.
Okay. Good.
Got it.
Got it. That's easy to do. Or even if it's like, we don't care where you fly, just don't fly at an airport, like, unless you have permission, right? Point is if you are flying, we're going to start going into, I've talked to the guy that is the president of the field. We're going to talk to him in a little while here about how to fly safely. If you belong to a club, what are the AMA requirements? What are the FAA requirements currently? What do they look like they're going to change? We're kind of go down that road. Just so that we're all aware. What is Part 107? What does that mean? What are you going to have? Like, what does it do for you? And what kinds of things you're going to have to learn? I've actually gotten a Part 107 certificate for municipalities. And I also let it lapse because we didn't use it. It wasn't the direction my company was going. So, But I've been through the test. It's not terrible. It just requires you to learn some things.
Right.
Weather patterns. What are the different zones of the airspace? What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? Basic stuff. So.
Well, good. And returning to our part of the hobby, let's work on wrapping this up.
All right.
Matthew, real short, what's on your workbench? What are you going to be working on?
The Spruce Goose will live again. I will figure out what the heck is going on with those motors. I will also get this foam board cutter finished and working before the holidays are up. I also intend to maiden flight the Viking through, was it S3UB? No, S3B? S3B? Yeah. I intend to maiden that. And I will probably bring another plane out from the grave before I tackle another one. And I'll probably fly the Spitfire and the Tiger Cat more because they're here, they're available, and they're a lot of fun to fly. I'll probably get more into FPV as we go.
Okay. And hopefully get the that time save finished up, yeah?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the things, the foam board cutter, definitely. Like I said, right now I have the X-axis and the Y-axis construction complete. I'm debating whether or not I want to keep the brace, the aluminum tubes, and they're not tubes, but the aluminum pieces, the frame pieces. If I want to leave them the stock that I got them at, or am I going to cut them down to be the size that he has? I think if I keep them long enough, I might be able to actually cut out monster foam or 2 sheets at a time. So I might leave it I got to see if I have the parts to do that. Otherwise, I'll cut it down. And it'll be,
Okay.
I'm hoping to put electronics on it tomorrow and test it out. And if it works, oh boy, we're all in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about you?
So I'm going to have, I don't know that I'm going to be building a whole lot in the next short bit. With the Spitfire out of commission, I will bring it in, have a closer look at it, and see if the damage can be repaired. If it can be remotely repaired, I'm going to give it a go and see if I can get it back in the air. I'm kind of to a point of writing it off and just saying it's done, but I will have a look at it.
Okay.
I may finally take the time to cut the new Fogey fuselage and horizontal vertical stabilizers so I can try slapping some solar wing on. I know I keep saying that, but it is something on the eventual to-do list.
Okay.
And while I may not get to it in the next 2 weeks or so, I do have the HRC7 still in its package sitting here. I'm just kind of waiting until I know, like, December's been weird trying to get work done for be able to take time off to go see family, so I'm trying to wait until I know I'm going to have the time to do it, because I don't want to run into sort of Boeing issues I had with the Vulture.
Yeah, you want to get the skin on and the frame built.
And get it built, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to let it sit half done and, let humidity issues, especially how it's fluctuating in my house right now with the cold and the rain and the not rain. And so, yeah.
Yeah, good old Carolinas. Gotta love it.
Anything else, Matthew?
Nothing. Just know that we're coming up on our anniversary, so I'm sure we'll be thinking of something fun for that.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to work on calling it here. As always, thank you guys for listening in. We apologize for last week, 2 weeks ago, last episode. And I know this episode may be running a little longer, but hopefully it maybe makes up for the missed episode last time. As always, if you have questions, thoughts, feedback, feel free to email us at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts. Also, you can head over to the aviationrcnoob.com, and we have a contact us form there that will send it directly to us
Awesome.
if you're not wanting to worry about trying to mess with the email or anything.
Hey, go over and say hi.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know you're out there. Say hey. We love hearing from you. And feel free to visit us on our Facebook page, Aviation RC Noob, linked in the description. We got a couple guys that post in there and share pictures. We enjoy seeing those. And I'll be including a link to our Discord server in the show notes as well. So feel free to hop into Discord and say hello and hang out and share pictures and talk about building and flying and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you watch what we're posting in detail, you probably know what we're going to be talking about at the next show a little bit.
That's true. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Again, guys, thanks. And
thanks again.
We will see y'all next time.
All right, have fun flying. Bye.
Bye.